I was told my promotion was coming, and it was always about 6 months away. Every time the conversation came up, the timeline felt close enough to believe, but never close enough to confirm. This story has been generalized for privacy. What matters isn't the company, it's the pattern. I worked in technical support for a manufacturing company, and before that, I had years of experience in the field. I was installing and servicing the product myself, so when I moved into support, I understood the product in a way most of the department didn't. And over time, I started taking on more responsibility, escalation calls, specialized equipment, situations that required field level judgment. And I would hear indirectly that my name was coming up in meetings, that people were impressed, that leadership had noticed. But none of it was direct and none of it was formal. Later, I was told a promotion was coming. There was a retirement planned in about 6 months, and the assumption was that I would step into that role. I had never asked for it, but once the expectation exists, you adjust and you prepare. And this is where something subtle started happening. Whenever someone in that higher role was out sick, I was asked to cover the responsibilities. It was always framed casually, "You'll be doing this soon anyways." Over time, that became normal, and I was the only one consistently asked to step in. The title wasn't mine, but the work increasingly was. And at first it felt like growth, and later it started to feel like substitution. As the retirement date got closer, conversations slowed and then stopped. 4 weeks out, nothing in writing, no timeline, no clarity. When I asked about it, I was told I might need to continue doing the higher level work while still in my current role for a few more months just to prove that I deserved it. When I asked HR whether the promotion would be formalized once the role opened, the answer was vague. It was likely, but they might also interview externally, and that I shouldn't assume anything. At that time, I thought maybe I just needed to prove myself more. Looking back, I see something else. The structure itself made proof endless. If advancement depends on discretion rather than defined criteria, there's always one more step, one more demonstration, one more period of waiting. So I applied elsewhere, accepted another offer, and left the day before the retirement. Looking back, what stands out isn't whether I deserve the promotion, it's the gap between recognition and structure. There's a difference between being praised and being positioned. You can be relied on, you can be valued, you can be talked about in meetings, but if nothing changes formally, your role hasn't changed. And when advancement depends on someone choosing to formalize your value rather than predefined criteria, discretion becomes leverage. Sometimes when advancement is discretionary rather than automatic, decision makers hesitate to commit, especially if that recognition shifts status or authority. That hesitation isn't always personal, it can be structural. Because formalizing a promotion reduces flexibility. Leaving it informal preserves options. From a system perspective, ambiguity protects management, but it often transfers uncertainty to the individual. This dynamic tends to show up when three conditions exist. First, when advancement is tied to vacancy rather than criteria. Second, when responsibility can expand informally without formal promotion. And third, when recognition is verbal rather than structural. When those three combine, high performers will often operate above their title without the clarity or protection that comes with it. In the short term, it'll work. Motivated people will stretch, they absorb the extra responsibility, but over time, the ambiguity accumulates And ambiguity changes behavior. Some may disengage, some may leave, some may reduce effort to match their formal role. The system doesn't break dramatically, it erodes gradually. What's interesting about ambiguity isn't just that it causes frustration, it changes behavior. When someone operates above their title without formal recognition, they start recalibrating effort. At first, they stretch, then they measure, then they compare, and eventually they adjust. Some reduce effort to match formal compensation. Some stop volunteering for additional responsibility. And some will detach emotionally while remaining physically present. And some leave entirely. None of this happens overnight, it happens slowly. Because when expectations aren't clearly defined, people will start to begin defining them for themselves. And that silent recalibration is rarely visible to leadership until it starts to compound. By the time output drops or engagement shifts, the structural trigger feels distant. But the drift started much earlier, usually at the moment clarity was postponed. And to be fair, from an organizational perspective, committing to a promotion carries risk. What if performance changes? What if team dynamics shift? Formalizing the authority removes flexibility, and keeping it informal preserves optionality. It isn't necessarily malicious, it's structural. But systems that prioritize flexibility often shift risk downwards, and that shift over time produces predictable outcomes. One of the challenges in modern organizations is that short-term flexibility often looks efficient. But efficiency and stability are not the same thing. A structure that preserves optionality today can quietly increase volatility tomorrow. When roles remain informal, decisions stay reversible, and that feels safe. But reversible systems can create unstable expectations, and unstable expectations change behavior in ways that aren't always immediately measurable. The question then becomes whether preserving flexibility is worth the long-time variability it introduces. Five years later, the company never fully returned to the same level of output in that role. And that doesn't mean that one person was irreplaceable, but it raises a design question. When someone consistently performs a role without formally holding it, what is that system optimizing for? Short-term flexibility, managerial leverage, reduced commitment? And is that trade-off intentional or simply inherited? Because every structure optimizes for something. The question is whether that optimization aligns with long-term stability. And if someone's already doing the job but doesn't formally hold it, what behavior is that system encouraging? And is that the behavior the organization actually wants to scale? This pattern isn't limited to promotions. You see similar incentive distortions in performance reviews as well. I'll explore that separately.